schnell ein rauschend Wasser schießt. So schnell ein rauschend Wasser schießt, so unseres Lebenstage. So schnell, so schnell, so schnell ein rauschend Wasser schießt, so eilen unseres Lebenstage, so eilen unseres Lebenstage, so schnell, so schnell, so schnell ein rauschend Wasser schießt, so eilen unseres Lebenstage, unseres Lebenstage, unseres Lebenstage. Die Zeit vergeht, die Stunden eilen, wie sich die Tropfen plötzlich eilen, wenn alles in den Abgrund schießt. Die Zeit vergeht, die Stunden eilen unseres Lebenstage so schnell, so schnell, so schnell ein rauschend Wasser schießt so eilen unseres Lebenstage, unseres Lebenstage, unseres Lebenstage.
Die Freude wird zur Traurigkeit, die Schönheit fällt als eine Blume, die Größe Stärke wird geschwächt, es ändert sich das Glück mit der Zeit, bald ist es aus mit Ehr und Ruhme. Die Wissenschaft und was ein Mensch dichtet, wird endlich durch das Grab vernichtet.
Irdische Schätze, das Herz zu hängen, ist eine Verführung der törichten Welt, ist eine Verführung, ist eine Verführung. An irdische Schätze, das Herz zu hängen, ist eine Verführung der törichten Welt, ist eine Verführung. Ist eine Verführung der törichten Welt, an irdische Schätze das Herz zu hängen, ist eine Verführung der törichten Welt. Leichtlichen Stieren verzehrende Gluten, wie rauschen und reißen gefallenden Fluten, bis alles zerschmettert, in Trümmern zerfällt. Leichtlichen Stieren verzehrende Gluten, die rauschen und reißen, die wallenden Fluten, bis alles zerschmettert, in Trümmern zerfällt. irdische Schätze das Herz zu hängen, ist eine Verführung der törichten Welt, ist eine Verführung, ist eine Verführung. An irdische Schätze das Herz zu hängen, ist eine Verführung der törichten Welt, ist eine Verführung. Eine Verführung, ist eine Verführung der törichten Welt, der törichten Welt, der törichten Welt.
Beneath a myrtle shade, which love for none but happy lovers made, I slept, and straight my love before me brought Phyllis, the object of my waking thought. Undressed she came my flames to meet, while love strode flowers beneath her feet, flowers which so pressed by her became more sweet. From the bright vision's head a careless veil of lawn was loosely spread, from her white temples fell her shaded hair, like cloudy sunshine, not too brown nor fair. Her hands, her lips did love inspire, her every grace my heart did fire, but most her eyes, which languished with desire.
"Ah, charming fair," said I, "how long can you my bliss and yours deny? By nature and by love this lonely shade was for revenge of suffering lovers made. Silence and shades with love agree, both shelter you and favour me. You cannot blush, because I cannot see." "No, let me die," she said, "rather than lose the spotless name of maid."
Faintly, methought, she spoke,
For all the while she bid me not believe her, with a smile. Then die, said I. She's still denied, and is it thus, thus, thus? She cried, you use a harmless maid? And so she died. I waked, and straight I knew I loved so well, it made my dream prove true. Fancy, the kinder mistress of the two, Fancy had done what Phyllis would not do. Ah, cruel nymph, cease your disdain, while I can dream you scorn in vain. Asleep or waking, you must ease my pain. When first our poet set himself to write, like a young bridegroom on his wedding night, he laid about him, and did so bestir him, his muse could never lie in quiet for him. But now his honeymoon is gone and past, yet the ungrateful drudgery must last, and he is bound, as civil husbands do, to strain himself in complaisance to you, to write in pain, and counterfeit a bliss like the faint smackings of an after-kiss. But you, like wives ill-pleased, supply his want. Each writing monsieur is a fresh gallant, and though perhaps 'twas done as well before, yet still there's something in a new amour. Your several poets work with several tools. One gets you wits, another gets you fools. This pleases you with some by-stroke of wit, this finds some cranny that was never hit. But should these jaunty lovers daily come to do your work, like your good man at home, their fine small-timbered wits would soon decay. These are gallants, but for a holiday. Others you had, who oftener have appeared, whom for mere impotence you have cashiered, such as at first came on with pomp and glory, but overstraining soon fell flat before ye. Their useless weight with patience long was borne, but at the last you threw 'em off with scorn. As for the poet of this present night, though now he claims in you an husband's right, he will not hinder you of fresh delight. He, like a seaman, seldom will appear, and means to trouble home but thrice a year. That only time from your gallants he'll borrow. Be kind today, and cuckold him tomorrow. Most modern wits such monstrous fools have shown, they seemed not of heaven's making but their own. Those nauseous harlequins in farce may pass, but there goes more to a substantial ass. Something of man must be exposed to view, that gallants they may more resemble you. Sir Fopling is a fool so nicely writ, the ladies would mistake him for a wit, and when he sings, talks loud, and cocks would cry, I vow methinks he's pretty company, so brisk, so gay, so travelled, so refined, as he took pains to graff upon his kind. True fops help nature's work, and go to school to file and finish God Almighty's fool, yet none Sir Fopling him or him can call. He's knight of the shire, and represents ye all. From each he meets he culls whate'er he can, legions his name, a people in a man. His bulky folly gathers as it goes, and rolling o'er you like a snowball grows. His various modes from various fathers follow. One taught the toss, and one the new French wallow. His sword not this, his cravat this designed, and this the yard-long snake he twirls behind. From one the sacred periwig he gained, which wind ne'er blew nor touch of hat profaned. Another's diving bow he did adore, which with a shog casts all the hair before, till he with full decorum brings it back, and rises with a water-spaniel shake. As for his songs, the ladies' dear delight, those sure he took from most of you who write. Yet every man is safe from what he feared, for no one fool is hunted from the herd.
Farewell, too little and too lately known, whom I began to think and call my own. For sure our souls were near allied, and thine cast in the same poetic mould with mine. One common note on either lyre did strike, and knaves and fools we both abhorred alike. To the same goal did both our studies drive, the last set out the soonest did arrive. Thus Nisus fell upon the slippery place, while his young friend performed and won the race. O early ripe, to thy abundant store what could advancing age have added more? It might, what nature never gives the young, have taught the numbers of thy native tongue, but satire needs not those, and wit will shine through the harsh cadence of a rugged line. A noble error, and but seldom made, when poets are by too much force betrayed. Thy generous fruits, though gathered ere their prime, still showed a quickness, and maturing time but mellows what we write to the dull sweets of rhyme. Once more, hail and farewell. Farewell, thou young but are too short Marcellus of our tongue. Thy brows with ivy and with laurels bound, but fate and gloomy night encompass thee around. I feed a flame within, which so torments me that it both pains my heart and yet contents me. 'Tis such a pleasing smart, and I so love it, that I had rather die than once remove it. Yet he for whom I grieve shall never know it. My tongue does not betray, nor my eyes show it. Not a sigh, not a tear my pain discloses, but they fall silently like dew on roses. Thus to prevent my love from being cruel, my heart's the sacrifice as 'tis the fuel. And while I suffer this to give him quiet, my faith rewards my love, though he deny it. On his eyes will I gaze, and there delight me. Where I conceal my love, no frown can fright me. To be more happy I dare not aspire, nor can I fall more low, mounting no higher.
Whilst Alexis lay pressed in her arms he loved best, with his hands round her neck and his head on her breast, he found the fierce pleasure too hasty to stay, and his soul in the tempest just flying away. When Celia saw this, with a sigh and a kiss, she cried, "Oh, my dear, I am robbed of my bliss. 'Tis unkind to your love, and unfaithfully done, to leave me behind you, and die all alone." The youth, though in haste, and breathing his last, in pity died slowly, while she died more fast, till at length she cried, "Now, my dear, now let us go. Now die, my Alexis, and I will die too." Thus entranced they did lie, till Alexis did try to recover new breath, that again he might die. Then often they died, but the more they did so, the nymph died more quick, and the shepherd more slow. 'Twas at the royal feast, for Persia won, by Philip's warlike son. Aloft in awful state, the godlike hero sate on his imperial throne. His valiant peers were placed around, their brows with roses and with myrtles bound. So should desert in arms be crowned. The lovely Thais by his side sate like a blooming eastern bride, in flower of youth and beauty's pride. Happy, happy, happy pair, none but the brave, none but the brave, none but the brave deserve the fair. Timotheus, placed on high, amid the tuneful choir, with flying fingers touched the lyre. The trembling notes ascend the sky, and heavenly joys inspire. The song began from Jove, who left his blissful seat above. Such is the power of mighty love. A dragon's fiery form belied the god. Sublime on radiant spires he rode, when he to fair Olympia pressed, and while he sought her snowy breast, then round her slender waist he curled, and stamped an image of himself, a sovereign of the world. The listening crowd admire the lofty sound. "A present deity," they shout around. "A present deity," the vaulted roofs rebound. With ravished ears the monarch hears, assumes the god, affects to nod, and seems to shake the spheres. The praise of Bacchus then the sweet musician sung, of Bacchus ever fair and ever young. The jolly god in triumph comes, sound the trumpets, beat the drums. Flushed with a purple grace, he shows his honest face. Now give the hautboys breath, he comes, he comes. Bacchus ever fair and young, drinking joys did first ordain. Bacchus' blessings are a treasure, drinking is the soldier's pleasure. Rich the treasure, sweet the pleasure, sweet is pleasure after pain. Bacchus' blessings are a treasure, drinking is the soldier's pleasure. Rich the treasure, sweet the pleasure, sweet is pleasure after pain. Soothed with the sound, the king grew vain, fought all his battles o'er again, and thrice he routed all his foes, and thrice he slew the slain. The master saw the madness rise, his glowing cheeks, his ardent eyes, and while he heaven and earth defied, changed his hand and checked his pride. He chose a mournful muse, soft pity to infuse. He sang Darius, great and good, by too severe a fate, fallen, 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 fallen from his high estate, and weltering in his blood, deserted at his utmost need by those his former bounty fed. On the bare earth exposed he lies, with not a friend to close his eyes. With downcast looks the joyless victor sat, revolving in his altered soul the various turns of chance below, and now and then a sigh he stole, and tears began to flow. Revolving in his altered soul the various turns of chance below, and now and then a sigh he stole, and tears began to flow. The mighty master smiled to see that love was in the next degree. 'Twas but a kindred sound to move, for pity melts the mind to love. Softly sweet in Lydian measures, soon he soothed his soul to pleasures. War, he sung, is toil and trouble, honor but an empty bubble, never ending, still beginning, fighting still and still destroying. If the world be worth thy winning, think, oh, think it worth enjoying. Lovely Thais sits beside thee. Take the good the gods provide thee. The many rend the skies with loud applause. So love was crowned, but music won the cause. The prince, unable to conceal his pain, gazed on the fair who caused his care, and sighed and looked, sighed and looked, sighed and looked, and sighed again. At length, with love and wine at once oppressed, the vanquished victor sunk upon her breast. Now strike the golden lyre again, a louder yet, and yet a louder strain. Break his bands of sleep asunder, and rouse him like a rattling peal of thunder. Hark, hark, the horrid sound has raised up his head as awaked from the dead, and amazed he stares around. Revenge, revenge, Timotheus cries. See the furies arise, see the snakes that they rear, how they hiss in their hair, and the sparkles that flash from their eyes. Behold a ghastly band, each a torch in his hand. Those are Grecian ghosts that in battle were slain, and unburied remain inglorious on the plain. Give the vengeance due to the valiant crew. Behold how they toss their torches on high, how they point to the Persian abodes and glittering temples of their hostile gods. The princes applaud with a furious joy, and the king seized a flambeau with zeal to destroy. Thais led the way to light him to his prey, and like another Helen fired another Troy. Thus long ago, ere heaving bellows learned to blow, while organs yet were mute, Timotheus to his breathing flute and sounding lyre could swell the soul to rage or kindle soft desire. At last divine Cecilia came, inventress of the vocal frame. The sweet enthusiast from her sacred store enlarged the former narrow bounds and added length to solemn sounds with nature's mother wit and arts unknown before. Let old Timotheus yield the prize, or both divide the crown. He raised a mortal to the skies, she drew an angel down. In pious times, ere priestcraft did begin, before polygamy was made a sin, when man on many multiplied his kind, ere one to one was cursedly confined, when nature prompted and no law denied promiscuous use of concubine and bride, then Israel's monarch, after heaven's own heart, his vigorous warmth did variously impart to wives and slaves, and wide as his command scattered his Maker's image through the land. Michal, of royal blood, the crown did wear, a soil ungrateful to the tiller's care. Not so the rest, for several mothers bore to godlike David several sons before, but since like slaves his bed they did ascend, no true succession could their seed attend. Of all this numerous progeny was none so beautiful, so brave, as Absalom. Whether, inspired by some diviner lust, his father got him with a greater gust, or that his conscious destiny made way by manly beauty to imperial sway, early in foreign fields he won renown, with kings and states allied to Israel's crown. In peace the thought of war he could remove, and seemed as he were only born for love. Whate'er he did, 'twas done with so much ease, in him alone 'twas natural to please. His motions all accompanied with grace, and paradise was opened in his face. With secret joy indulgent David viewed his youthful image in his son renewed. To all his wishes nothing he denied, and made the charming Annabel his bride. What faults he had, for who from faults is free, his father could not, or he would not see. Some warm excesses which the law forbore were construed youth that purged by boiling ore, and Ammon's Mirtha by a specious name was called a just revenge for injured fame. Thus, praised and loved, the noble youth remained, while David undisturbed in Sion reigned. But life can never be sincerely blessed. Heaven punishes the bad and proves the best. The Jews, a headstrong, moody, murmuring race, as ever tried the extent and stretch of grace, God's pampered people, whom, debauched with ease, no king could govern, nor no god could please. Gods they had tried of every shape and size that godsmiths could produce or priests devise. These Adam wits, too fortunately free, began to dream they wanted liberty. And when no rule, no precedent was found of men by laws less circumscribed and bound, they led their wild desires to woods and caves, and thought that all but savages were slaves. They who, when Saul was dead without a blow, made foolish Ishbosheth the crown forego, who banished David did from Hebron bring, and with a general shout proclaimed him king, Those very Jews, who at their very best their humour more than loyalty expressed, now wondered why so long they had obeyed an idle monarch, which their hands had made, thought they might ruin him they could create, or melt him to that golden calf estate. But these were random bolts. No formed design nor interest made the factious crowd to join. The sober part of Israel, free from stain, well knew the value of a peaceful reign, and looking backward with a wise affright, saw seams of wounds, dishonest to the sight, in contemplation of whose ugly scars they cursed the memory of civil wars. The inhabitants of old Jerusalem were Jebusites, the town so called from them, and theirs the native right. But when the chosen people grew more strong, the rightful cause at length became the wrong, and every loss the men of Jebus bore, they still were thought God's enemies the more. Thus warned and weakened, well or ill content, submit they must to David's government. Impoverished and deprived of all command, their taxes doubled as they lost their land, and what was harder yet to flesh and blood, their gods disgraced and burnt like common wood. From hence began that plot, the nation's curse, bad in itself, but represented worse, raised in extremes and in extremes decried, with oaths affirmed, with dying vows denied, not weighed or winnowed by the multitude, but swallowed in the mass, unchewed and crude. Some truth there was, but dashed and brewed with lies to please the fools and puzzle all the wise. Succeeding times did equal folly call, believing nothing or believing all. The Egyptian rites the Jebusites embraced, where gods were recommended by their taste. Such savoury deities must needs be good, as served at once for worship and for food. By force they could not introduce these gods, for 10 to 1 in former days was odds. So fraud was used, the sacrifices strayed. Fools are more hard to conquer than persuade. Their busy teachers mingled with the Jews, and raked for converts even the court and stews, which Hebrew priests the more unkindly took, because the fleece accompanies the flock. This plot, which failed for want of common sense, had yet a deep and dangerous consequence. For as when raging fevers boil the blood, and standing lake soon floats into a flood, and every hostile humour which before slept quiet in its channels bubbles o'er, so several factions from this time ferment, work up to foam, and threat the government. Some by their friends, more by themselves thought wise, opposed the power to which they could not rise. Some had in courts been great and thrown from thence, like fiends were hardened in impenitence. Some by their monarch's fatal mercy grown from pardoned rebels, kinsmen to the throne, were raised in power and public office high, strong bands, if bands ungrateful men could tie. Of these the false Achitophel was first, a man to all succeeding ages cursed, for close designs and crooked counsels fit, sagacious, bold, and turbulent of wit, restless, unfixed in principles and place, in power unpleased, impatient of disgrace, a fiery soul, which working out its way, fretted the pygmy body to decay, and o'er-informed the tenement of clay. A daring pilot in extremity, pleased with his danger when the waves went high, he sought the storms, but for a calm unfit, would steer too nigh the sands to boast his wit. Great wits are sure to madness near allied, and thin partitions do their bounds divide. Else why should he, with wealth and honour blessed, refuse his age the needful hours of rest, punish a body which he could not please, bankrupt of life yet prodigal of ease, and all to leave what with his toil he won to that unfeathered, two-legged thing, a son, got while his soul did huddled notions try, and born a shapeless lump like anarchy. In friendship false, implacable in hate, resolved to ruin or to rule the state, To compass this, the triple bond he broke, the pillars of the public safety shook, and fitted Israel for a foreign yoke. Then seized with fear, yet still affecting fame, usurped a patriot's all-atoning name. So easy still it proves in factious times with public zeal to cancel private crimes. How safe is treason, and how sacred ill, where none can sin against the people's will, where crowds can wink and no offence be known, since in another's guilt they find their own. Yet fame deserved no enemy can grudge. The statesman we abhor, but praise the judge. In Israel's courts ne'er sat an Abethdin with more discerning eyes or hands more clean, unbribed, unsought, the wretched to redress, swift of dispatch and easy of access. Oh, had he been content to serve the crown with virtues only proper to the gown, or had the rankness of the soil been freed from cockle that oppressed the noble seed, David for him his tuneful harp had strung, and heaven had wanted one immortal song. But wild ambition loves to slide, not stand, and fortune's ice prefers to virtue's land. Achitophel, grown weary to possess a lawful fame and lazy happiness, disdained the golden fruit to gather free, and lent the crowd his arm to shake the tree. Now, manifest of crimes contrived long since, he stood at bold defiance with his prince, held up the buckler of the people's cause against the crown, and skulked behind the laws. The wished occasion of the plot he takes, some circumstances finds, but more he makes. By buzzing emissaries fills the ears of listening crowds with jealousies and fears of arbitrary counsels brought to light, and proves the king himself a Jebusite. Weak arguments, which yet he knew full well were strong with people easy to rebel. For governed by the moon, the giddy Jews tread the same track when she the prime renews. And once in 20 years their scribes record, by natural instinct they change their lord. Achitophel still wants a chief, and none was found so fit as warlike Absalom. Not that he wished his greatness to create, for politicians neither love nor hate, but for he knew his title not allowed would keep him still depending on the crowd. That kingly power, thus ebbing out, might be drawn to the dregs of a democracy. Him he attempts with studied arts to please, and sheds his venom in such words as these. Auspicious prince, at whose nativity some royal planet ruled the southern sky, thy longing country's darling and desire, their cloudy pillar and their guardian fire, their second Moses whose extended wand divides the seas and shows the promised land, whose dawning day in every distant age has exercised the sacred prophet's rage, the people's prayer, the glad diviner's theme, the young men's vision and the old men's dream. How long wilt thou the general joy detain, starve and defraud the people of thy reign, content ingloriously to pass thy days, like one of virtue's fools that feeds on praise? Till thy fresh glories, which now shine so bright, grow stale and tarnish with our daily sight. Believe me, royal youth, thy fruit must be or gathered ripe or rot upon the tree. Heaven has to all allotted, soon or late, some lucky revolution of their fate, whose motions if we watch and guide with skill, for human good depends on human will, our fortune rolls as from a smooth descent, and from the first impression takes the bent. But if unseized, she glides away like wind, and leaves repenting folly far behind. Now she meets you with a glorious prize, and spreads her locks before her as she flies, Had thus old David, from whose loins you spring, not dared, when fortune called him to be king, at Gath an exile he might still remain, and heaven's anointing oil had been in vain. Let his successful youth your hopes engage, but shun the example of declining age. Behold him setting in his western skies, the shadows lengthening as the vapours rise. He is not now, as when on Jordan's sand the joyful people thronged to see him land, covering the beach and blackening all the strand, but like the prince of angels from his height comes tumbling downward with diminished light, betrayed by one poor plot to public scorn, our only blessing since his cursed return. Those heaps of people which one sheaf did bind, blown off and scattered by a puff of wind. What strength can he to your design oppose, naked of friends, and round beset with foes? All sorts of men, by my successful arts, abhorring kings, estrange their altered hearts from David's rule. And 'tis the general cry, religion, commonwealth, and liberty. If you, as champion of the public good, add to their arms a chief of royal blood, what may not Israel hope, and what applause might such a general gain by such a cause? Not barren praise alone, that gaudy flower fair only to the sight, but solid power. And nobler is a limited command given by the love of all your native land than a successive title, long and dark, drawn from the mouldy rolls of Noah's Ark. What cannot praise effect in mighty minds, when flattery soothes, and when ambition blinds? Desire of power, on earth a vicious weed, yet sprung from high, is of celestial seed. In God 'tis glory, and when men aspire, 'tis but a spark too much of heavenly fire. The ambitious youth, too covetous of fame, too full of angels' metal in his frame, unwarily was led from virtue's ways, made drunk with honour, and debauched with praise. Half loath and half consenting to the ill, for loyal blood within him struggled still, he thus replied, "And what pretence have I to take up arms for public liberty? My father governs with unquestioned right, the faith's defender and mankind's delight, good, gracious, just, observant of the laws, and heaven by wonders has espoused his cause. Whom has he wronged in all his peaceful reign? Who sues for justice to his throne in vain? What millions has he pardoned of his foes, whom just revenge did to his wrath expose? Mild, easy, humble, studious of our good, inclined to mercy, and averse from blood. If mildness ill with stubborn Israel suit, his crime is God's beloved attribute. What could he gain his people to betray, or change his right for arbitrary sway? Let haughty Pharaoh curse with such a reign his fruitful Nile, and yoke a servile train. If David's rule Jerusalem displease, the dog star heats their brains to this disease. Why then should I, encouraging the bad, turn rebel and run popularly mad? The people might assert their liberty, but what was right in them were crime in me. His favour leaves me nothing to require, prevents my wishes and outruns desire. What more can I expect while David lives? All but his kingly diadem he gives, and that—" But there he paused, and sighing said, "Is justly destined for a worthier head. For when my father from his toils shall rest, and late augment the number of the blest, his lawful issue shall the throne ascend, or the collateral line, where that shall end. His brother, though oppressed with vulgar spite, yet dauntless and secure of native right, of every royal virtue stands possessed, still dear to all the bravest and the best. Why should I then repine at heaven's decree, which gives me no pretence to royalty? Yet oh, that fate
propitiously inclined had raised my birth, or had debased my mind, to my large soul not all her treasure lent, and then betrayed it to a mean descent. I find my mounting spirits bold, and David's part disdains my mother's mould. Why am I scanted by a niggard birth? My soul disclaims the kindred of her earth, and made for empire whispers me within, desire of greatness is a godlike sin. Him staggering so, when hell's dire agent found, while fainting virtue scarce maintained her ground, he pours fresh forces in, and thus replies: The eternal God, supremely good and wise, imparts not these prodigious gifts in vain. What wonders are reserved to bless your reign? Against your will, your arguments have shown such virtues only given to guide a throne. Not that your father's mildness I condemn, but manly force becomes the diadem. 'Tis true he grants to people all they crave, and more perhaps than subjects ought to have. For lavish grants suppose a monarch tame, and more his goodness than his wit proclaim. But when should people strive their bonds to break, if not when kings are negligent and weak? Succession, for the general good designed, in its own wrong a nation cannot bind. If altering that a people can relieve, better one suffer than a nation grieve. Nor let his love enchant your generous mind. 'Tis nature's trick to propagate her kind. Our fond begetters, who would never die, love but themselves in their posterity. Or let his kindness by the effects be tried, or let him lay his vain pretence aside. Would David have you thought his darling son? What means he then to alienate the crown? The name of godly he may blush to bear. 'Tis after God's own heart to cheat his heir. He to his brother gives supreme command, to you a legacy of barren land. Perhaps the old harp on which he thrums his lays, or some dull Hebrew ballad in your praise. Then the next heir, a prince severe and wise, already looks on you with jealous eyes, sees through the thin disguises of your arts, and marks your progress in the people's hearts. Though now his mighty soul its grief contains, he meditates revenge who least complains. And like a lion slumbering in the way, or sleep dissembling while he waits his prey, his fearless foes within his distance draws, constrains his roaring, and contracts his paws, till at the last, his time for fury found, he shoots with sudden vengeance from the ground. The prostrate vulgar passes o'er and spares, but with a lordly rage his hunters tears. Your case no tame expedients will afford. Resolve on death or conquest by the sword, which for no less a stake than life you draw. And self-defence is nature's eldest law. Leave the warm people no considering time, for then rebellion may be thought a crime. Prevail yourself of what occasion gives, but try your title while your father lives. And that your arms may have a fair pretence, proclaim you take them in the king's defence, whose sacred life each minute would expose to plots from seeming friends and secret foes. And who can sound the depth of David's soul? Perhaps his fear his kindness may control. He fears his brother, though he loves his son, for plighted vows too late to be undone. If so, by force he wishes to be gained, like woman's lechery to seem constrained. Doubt not, but when he most affects the frown, commit a pleasing rape upon the crown.
secure his person to secure your cause. They who possess the prince possess the laws. He said, and this advice above the rest with Absalom's mild nature suited best. Unblamed of life, ambition set aside, not stained with cruelty nor puffed with pride, how happy had he been if destiny had higher placed his birth, or not so high. His kingly virtues might have claimed a throne, and blessed all other countries but his own. But charming greatness, since so few refuse, 'tis juster to lament him than accuse. Strong were his hopes a rival to remove, with blandishments to gain the public love, to head the faction while their zeal was hot, and popularly prosecute the plot. To further this, Achitophel unites the malcontents of all the Israelites, whose differing parties he could wisely join, for several ends to serve the same design. The best, and of the princes some were such, who thought the power of monarchy too much, mistaken men, and patriots in their hearts, not wicked, but seduced by impious arts. By these the springs of property were bent and wound so high, they cracked the government. But far more numerous was the herd of such who think too little and who talk too much. These out of mere instinct, they knew not why, adored their father's God and property, and by the same blind benefit of fate the devil and the Jebusite did hate, born to be saved even in their own despite, because they could not help believing right. Such were the tools, but a whole hydra more remains, of sprouting heads too long to score. Some of their chiefs were princes of the land. In the first rank of these did Zimri stand, a man so various that he seemed to be not one but all mankind's epitome. Stiff in opinions, always in the wrong, was everything by starts and nothing long, but in the course of one revolving moon was chemist, fiddler, statesman, and buffoon, then all for women, painting, rhyming, drinking, besides 10,000 freaks that died in thinking. Blessed madman, who could every hour employ with something new to wish or to enjoy. Railing and praising were his usual themes, and both to show his judgment in extremes. So over-violent, or over-civil, that every man with him was god or devil. In squandering wealth was his peculiar art. Nothing went unrewarded but desert. Beggared by fools, whom still he found too late, he had his jest and they had his estate. He laughed himself from court, then sought relief by forming parties, but could ne'er be chief. For spite of him, the weight of business fell on Absalom and wise Achitophel. Surrounded thus with friends of every sort, deluded Absalom forsakes the court. Impatient of high hopes, urged with renown, and fired with near possession of the crown. The admiring crowd are dazzled with surprise, and on his goodly person feed their eyes. His joy concealed, he sets himself to show, on each side bowing popularly low. His looks, his gestures, and his words he frames, and with familiar ease repeats their names. Thus formed by nature, furnished out with arts, he glides unfelt into their secret hearts. Then with a kind compassionating look, and sighs bespeaking pity ere he spoke, few words he said, but easy those, and fit, more slow than high blood drops, and far more sweet. I mourn, my countrymen, your lost estate, though far unable to prevent your fate. Behold a banished man, for your dear cause, exposed a prey to arbitrary laws. Yet oh, that I alone could be undone, cut off from empire, and no more a son. Now all your liberties a spoil are made. Egypt and Tyrus intercept your trade, and Jebusites your sacred rights invade. My father, whom with reverence yet I name, charmed into ease, is careless of his fame, and bribed with petty sums of foreign gold, is grown in Bathsheba's embraces old, exalts his enemies, his friends destroys, and all his power against himself employs. He gives, and let him give, my right away, but why should he his own and yours betray? He, only he, can make the nation bleed, and he alone from my revenge is freed. Take then my tears. With that he wiped his eyes. 'Tis all the aid my present power supplies. No court informer can these arms accuse. These arms may sons against their fathers use. And 'tis my wish the next successor's reign may make no other Israelite complain.
Youth, beauty, graceful action seldom fail, but common interest always will prevail, and pity never ceases to be shown to him who makes the people's wrongs his own. The crowd, that still believe their kings oppress, with lifted hands their young Messiah bless, who now begins his progress to ordain, with chariots, horsemen, and a numerous train. From east to west his glories he displays, and like the sun the promised land surveys. Fame runs before him as the morning star, and shouts of joy salute him from afar. Each house receives him as a guardian god, and consecrates the place of his abode. O foolish Israel, never warned by ill, still the same bait, and circumvented still. Did ever men forsake their present ease, in midst of health imagine a disease, take pains contingent mischiefs to foresee, make heirs for monarchs, and for God decree? What shall we think? Can people give away, both for themselves and sons, their native sway? If they may give and take whene'er they please, not kings alone, the Godhead's images, but government itself at length must fall to nature's state, where all have right to all. Now what relief can righteous David bring? How fatal 'tis to be too good a king. Friends he has few, so high the madness grows. Who dare be such must be the people's foes. Yet some there were, even in the worst of days. Some let me name, and naming is to praise. In this short file, Barzillai first appears. Barzillai, crowned with honor and with years. Long since, the rising rebels he withstood in regions waste beyond the Jordan's flood. Unfortunately brave to buoy the state, but sinking underneath his master's fate. In exile with his godlike prince he mourned, for him he suffered, and with him returned. Zadok the priest, whom shunning power and place, his lowly mind advanced to David's grace. With him the Sagan of Jerusalem, of hospitable soul and noble stem, him of the western dome, whose weighty sense flows in fit words and heavenly eloquence. Jotham, of piercing wit and pregnant thought, endued by nature and by learning taught to move assemblies, who but only tried the worse a while, then chose the better side. Nor chose alone, but turned the balance too. So much the weight of one brave man can do. These were the chief, a small but faithful band of worthies in the breach who dared to stand and tempt the united fury of the land. With grief they viewed such powerful engines bent to batter down the lawful government. These ills they saw, and as their duty bound, they showed the king the danger of the wound. that no concessions from the throne would please, but lenitives fomented the disease. That Absalom, ambitious of the crown, was made the lure to draw the people down. That false Achitophel's pernicious hate had turned the plot to ruin church and state. With all these loads of injuries oppressed, and long revolving in his careful breast the event of things, at last, his patience tired, thus, from his royal throne, by heaven inspired, the godlike David spoke. With awful fear, his train, their Maker, in their Master hear. Thus long have I, by native mercy swayed, my wrongs dissembled, my revenge delayed, so willing to forgive the offending age, so much the Father did the King assuage. But now, so far my clemency they slight, the offenders question my forgiving right. That one was made for many, they contend, but 'tis to rule, for that's a monarch's end. They call my tenderness of blood my fear, though manly tempers can the longest bear. Yet since they will divert my native course, 'tis time to show I am not good by force. Those heaped affronts that haughty subjects bring are burthens for a camel, not a king. Kings are the public pillars of the state, born to sustain and prop the nation's weight. If my young Samson will pretend a call to shake the column, let him share the fall. But oh, that yet he would repent and live. How easy 'tis for parents to forgive. With how few tears a pardon might be won from nature pleading for a darling son. Poor pitied youth, by my paternal care, raised up to all the height his frame could bear. What then is left, but with a jealous eye to guard the small remains of royalty? The law shall still direct my peaceful sway, and the same law teach rebels to obey. How ill my fear they by my mercy scan! Beware the fury of a patient man. Law they require, let law then show her face. They could not be content to look on grace her hinder part, but with a daring eye to tempt the terror of her front and die. By their own arts 'tis righteously decreed, those dire artificers of death shall bleed. Against themselves their witnesses will swear, till viper-like their mother plot they tear, and suck for nutriment that bloody gore, which was their principle of life before. Their Belial with their Beelzebub will fight. Thus on my foes shall do me right, nor doubt the event. For factious crowds engage in their first onset all their brutal rage. Then let 'em take an unresisted course, retire and traverse and delude their force. But when they stand all breathless, urge the fight, and rise upon them with redoubled might. For lawful power is still superior found, when long driven back, at length it stands the ground. He said, the Almighty, nodding, gave consent, and peals of thunder shook the firmament. Henceforth, a series of new time began. The mighty years in long procession ran. Once more the godlike David was restored, and willing nations knew their lawful Lord.
Drache brennt vor Neid. Der alte Drache brennt vor Neid und dichtet stets auf neues Leid, und dichtet stets auf neues Leid. Der alte Drache brennt vor Neid und dichtet stets auf neues Leid, dass das kleine Häuflein trägt. Stets auf neues Leid, und dichtet stets auf neues Leid, dass das kleine Häuflein trägt. Dass das kleine Häuflein trennet. Was Gottes ist. Erzählt was Gottes ist, bald, bald. Braucht nicht, bald, bald. Braucht nicht, bald braucht nicht, weil nicht rat noch ruht. Kennet nicht was noch ruht, kennet, weil nicht rat noch ruht, kennet. Drache brennt vor Neid. Der alte Drache brennt vor Neid und dichtet stets auf neues Leid, und dichtet stets auf neues Leid. Der alte Drache brennt vor Neid und dichtet stets auf neues Leid, dass das kleine Häuflein trägt. Drache brennt vor Neid, dichtet stets auf neues Leid, und dichtet stets auf neues Leid, dass das kleine Häuflein brennt. Dass das kleine Häuflein brennt.
Lass, o Fürst der Cherubinen, o Fürst der Cherubinen, lass, o Fürst der Cherubinen, dieser Helden hohe Schar, immer da deine Gläubigen bedienen, immer da. Lass, o Fürst der Cherubinen, dieser Helden hohe Schar, immer da deine Gläubigen bedienen, deine Gläubigen bedienen. Dass sie auf Elias Wagen sie zu dir gen Himmel tragen, dass sie auf Elias Wagen sie zu dir gen Himmel tragen, sie zu dir gen Himmel tragen. Dass sie auf Elias Wagen sie zu dir gen Himmel tragen, dass sie auf Elias Wagen sie zu dir gen Himmel tragen, sie zu dir gen Himmel tragen. Lass, o Fürst der Cherubinen, lass, o Fürst der Cherubinen, o Fürst der Cherubinen, lass, o Fürst der Cherubinen, dieser Helden hohen Schar, immer da, immer da. Lass, o Fürst der Cherubinen, dieser Helden hohe Schar, immer da, deine Gläubigen bedienen, deine Gläubigen bedienen. hast du nicht an uns getan? Was tust du nicht noch täglich an den Deinen? Du kommst und lässt dein Licht, du kommst und lässt dein Licht mit vollem Segen scheinen. Du kommst und lässt dein Licht mit vollem Segen scheinen. Mit vollem Segen scheinen. Komm, Jesu, komm zu deiner Kirche. Komm, Jesu, komm zu deiner Kirche und gib ein selig neues Jahr. Komm, komm, komm zu deiner Kirche. Komm, Jesu, komm. Komm, Jesu, komm zu deiner Kirche, komm, komm, komm und gib ein selig neues Jahr und gib ein selig neues Jahr. Befördere deines Namens Ehre, erhalte die gesunde Lehre und segne Kanzel und Altar. Befördere deines Namens Ehre, erhalte die gesunde Lehre und segne Kanzel und Altar. 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 Komm, Jesu, komm zu deiner Kirche. Komm, Jesu, komm
wird und die Tür auftun, zu dem werde ich eingehen und das Abendmahl mit ihm halten und mit mir.
Seine Lust an mir zu sehen, dass ich so